Hi, I'm Melissa, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about calcium. Do you guys know what calcium is? Well, it's a mineral, and I bet you guys would probably tell me that we would find it in our dairy food group. Well, dairy foods are generally where we're going to find foods that contain calcium. Some examples of those dairy foods might include milk, cheese, or even yogurt. Now that you know what calcium is, do you know why it's so important to include foods with calcium in our everyday? Calcium helps to build strong bones and teeth. Beyond helping to build and maintain strong bones, calcium can help to prevent breaks or even fractures in the bone. It can also help us to lift heavy things. And you know what? It's not just heavy things. Our muscles are needed to pick up even just a pencil or a newspaper. In order for our bones to stay strong, there are many nutrients that play a part in the process. But for today, we're just going to focus on calcium and vitamin D. These two nutrients are actually teammates. They work together so that our body knows what to do with them. Are you familiar with vitamin D? Well, vitamin D helps with the absorption of calcium. It actually takes the calcium from the food that we eat in our digestive tract into our bloodstream, and then our bloodstream then will deliver it to where it's needed in our bodies. Did you know that our bodies can form vitamin D while we are outside in the sun? 10 to 15 minutes of sun exposure 2 to 3 times per week may be sufficient to make enough vitamin D. What are some foods that we can consume to get vitamin D? Well, we can get vitamin D by drinking milk or eating other foods that are fortified with vitamin D, such as cereal. Do you know what the word fortified means? Fortified just means that the food does not naturally contain that nutrient, so it's added to the food. Milk does not naturally contain vitamin D, but most of the milk we drink is fortified, meaning that it's added vitamin D to help us get enough in our diet. Other foods that you could consume include eggs and even fish like salmon or tuna. So why is all of this important? Couldn't we just take calcium and vitamin D whenever your stores are getting low? Well, our bones are living organs, and calcium is being used and deposited from our bones every single day. It's important to start focusing on getting enough vitamin D and calcium now, because once you hit the age of 30, and I know it seems like a long ways away, but your bone mass is going to begin to decline, and you won't be able to store as much calcium in your bones. So how do you think this could affect us as we age? When we don't get enough calcium and vitamin D, our muscles can function to the best of their ability. That means it might be harder to do simple everyday tasks like picking things up or even just performing at our best during exercise. Our bones also have a greater likeliness of being weak. Have you heard of the word osteoporosis? This is a disease where our bones can become weak or brittle due to a loss of calcium. When they become weak and brittle, we are more likely to fracture or break a bone. Eating enough calcium every day can help to prevent osteoporosis later in life. Part of the natural aging process includes our bones breaking down faster than new bone can be formed. I'd like to show you 3 different models of healthy versus weak bones. Now remember, all of these examples are showing you the same exact thing, but just a different way of looking at it. In my first example, I'm going to look at if we were to be looking at bone under a microscope. So here we've got healthy bone. You can see that it is a little bit porous, but we've got these thicker portions to where this bone is still very stable and strong. Over time, if we don't get enough calcium, look what can happen. Our bones become even weaker. They are more porous, they're more fragile because they're a lot thinner. And so if we bump into something, we're more likely to break or fracture this bone because of how thin and weak that it is. Next example, I've got normal bone, and then we've got our bone that's a lot weaker. Can you tell the difference between these two just by looking at them? Our weaker bone has more slots in it. There's more holes, it's more porous,
versus our healthy bone that doesn't have as much. If I were to turn these sideways and move them around like this, the same speed, can you tell the difference between the two? Which one looks weaker? You might notice that this bone is a little bit more wobbly and weaker than the healthy bone. And the last way that I want to show you healthy versus unhealthy bone is a way that you're probably used to seeing it. So right here, we've got our healthy, strong bone, and over time, if we don't get enough calcium and vitamin D, once again, our bones become weak and brittle and become more porous. And over time, what can happen is that we can break them or fracture the bone a lot easier because of a lack of calcium and vitamin D in our diet.
Remember, weak bone can develop into osteoporosis over time. Generally, osteoporosis happens most often in older women, but it can happen at any age and to men or women. So remember, osteoporosis is preventable. Do you remember some of the foods that we talked about that contain calcium?
So what's another way that we can keep our bones strong? Well, weight-bearing exercise cause our bones and muscles to work against the force of gravity and help our bones absorb the calcium that they need. Think about it. Gravity is holding us down on the ground, and we need exercises that add a little more pressure onto our bones so that it can activate the bone building process. Weight-bearing activities like walking, jogging, aerobics, dancing, gymnastics, tennis, push-ups, basketball, volleyball, field hockey, football, soccer, racquetball, and even weightlifting are all good examples of exercises that you could participate in to get strong bones.
So how much from the dairy food group do we need to get enough calcium? The amount is going to depend on your age. Children and teens 9 to 18 years old need at least 3 cups of dairy foods each day to get the recommended 1,300 milligrams of calcium per day. This age group needs the most due to growth spurts.
There are other food groups besides the dairy food group where we can find calcium to incorporate into our diet. Some of those foods might include fortified cereals or even breads from the grain groups. From the fruit and veggie food groups, we'd want to incorporate foods like dark green leafy vegetables like broccoli, spinach, kale, bok choy, or even things like fortified orange juice. From the protein food group, you could even include foods such as canned salmon with the bones, maybe some beans or almonds. These would all be wonderful choices to incorporate into your diet to make sure that you're getting enough calcium. Remember, you can find out the amount of calcium and vitamin D that's found in a food or beverage by simply checking out the nutrition facts label. A food label with at least 20% of the daily value of calcium or vitamin D is a good source of that nutrient. So let's take a look at a label.
Let's take a look at this food label example. At the bottom, you'll notice vitamin D and calcium. And across from each of those nutrients, you'll see a percent daily value. If the percent daily value is 20% or more, this is considered high for that nutrient. If it's 5% or less, it's considered low for that nutrient. So in the example provided, this food product is a good source of calcium and an adequate source of vitamin D. So what are some examples of ways that we can get calcium in a whole day? For breakfast, you might have whole grain fortified cereal with low-fat milk or a glass of calcium fortified orange juice. For lunch, maybe a turkey sandwich on whole grain bread that's fortified with lettuce, tomato, and cheese, and maybe a yogurt. For dinner, maybe you have grilled chicken, some broccoli, which remember contains calcium, some macaroni and cheese, and low-fat chocolate milk. Do you know what lactose intolerance is? People that experience lactose intolerance have a hard time breaking down the sugar that is found in milk and many dairy products. which is called lactose. When they eat or drink dairy foods, it may cause their stomach to become upset. So what are some other ways that these individuals can still get calcium in their diet? Eat dairy foods as part of a meal rather than alone. Eat smaller, more frequent portions of dairy foods. Choose cheeses like Swiss, Colby, Parmesan, and Cheddar, as aged cheeses have lower levels of lactose. Yogurt is more easily digested because of its active cultures. Buy lactose-reduced or lactose-free milk. Buy calcium-fortified juices or milk alternatives such as soy, rice, and almond milk. Eat calcium-rich non-dairy foods such as canned fish, collard greens, turnip greens, white beans, and calcium-fortified cereals and soy products.
Remember to read the nutrition facts labels of your foods and beverages to see if they contain calcium and vitamin D and to see how much. I hope you enjoyed learning about calcium and vitamin D today and that you learned a lot about the benefits and ways to incorporate it into your diet. We'll see you next time.